I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
So last week we left off dealing with the date, and we had discussed how in about 931 the kingdom was divided into Rehoboam. We had in 722 Israel is conquered by Assyria, so Israel was out of the picture. 586 the conquest of Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar was complete, but it ended when the Medes and the Persians came and defeated Babylon. Cyrus allowed those who were captive to return to Jerusalem. The second temple, which is what we've been dealing with in Haggai and Zechariah, was finally completed in about 516. It took them about 20 years to complete. So the message of Malachi is after that. It's around the time of Nehemiah and probably extends a little further than Nehemiah. It is the final book of the Old Testament for a reason. It is the final book of prophecy before what would be known as the 400 years of silence, where there was not a prophet in Israel and in Judah. Malachi was it, and before Christ came around the break between BC and AD. So we're now going to turn to the historical purpose of Malachi. Just so we can refresh our memories, this is the map of the main part of the world. There's Italy and further west we know, but this is that map. Yes, what do you got?
The second temple, is that still in existence today?
No. Well, as far as the Temple Mount is, but the Dome of the Rock sits on that second. No, the second temple is the one that Haggai and Zechariah built. Herod's temple was built upon that. That's still considered the second temple. But Herod made it the grand thing it was when Jesus was on earth. It was destroyed in 70 A.D. The Jews don't have a temple today. The destroyed temple, they have the western wall where and the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount actually really is not controlled by them. The Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim mosque, sits on the Temple Mount where the Temple of Solomon sat. And I truly believe that is by divine providence, not that God approves of the Muslims. But as long as the Dome of the Rock sits there, the Jews can't rebuild their temple. God destroyed that temple on purpose through the Romans because he wasn't going to have Judaism competing with Christianity. And up until that point, it was. If you recall from Romans and Galatians and Hebrews and a whole bunch of the Old Testament, you have competition. You have so much having to be dealt with when it came to, all right, we don't follow the law of Moses, we follow Christ. Sandra's sick, so you're going to need to take Nathaniel, okay? It is, and that'll be something maybe we consider for the future. You're talking about, like as far as... Yeah. Yeah, that is a good lesson, and perhaps something I would consider for the future. Here is the world as we know it in the time of Malachi. As I said, there's further to the west. Yeah, there's further to the west of Italy. We see the boot of Italy right here, and of course there's France and Spain and England and across the Atlantic Ocean, North America. But this is the Medo-Persian Empire. It extended all the way through Egypt, all the way west to Libya, to what would be Libya today. This is Turkey right here, and Paul did a lot of his work right in here. We'd have Ephesus over here, we'd have Colossae, we'd have Philippi up here. We'd have Thessalonica. This is Greece. The Medo-Persians never did get to Greece. They were defeated in Macedonia by the Greeks and Alexander the Great. And so we have the Medo-Persian Empire conquering all the way to Greece's doorstep, but no further. And of course, it went all the way east. This is Iraq today, right here. Iran's here. Afghanistan, Pakistan, all of the stands that you get on your map today, all the way up here. And of course, Russia's a little further north. But the Persians still exist today. You hear in the news of the Iranians, they're the Persians. They're the same Persians. But, of course, they don't have the large empire. And so this, basically, the Medo-Persian Empire came along and defeated Babylon and took their territory. Greece, when Alexander the Great comes, not too far after the Book of Malachi, will take all of that and go further east to India. And so Greece will have the whole known world, and the Romans behind it will take over that. But that, and in Judah, this is what we still have. We still don't have Judea, which will come all the way across down here. Galilee exists, but it's not populated with a bunch of the Jews. It will be. Samaria is in the middle. The Samaritans are there, and so the map is setting up slowly for Christ. When Greece comes in and takes over, it's going to divide this territory into the sections we see in the New Testament. We'd have Judea, we'd have Samaria, we'd have Decapolis, which would be over here, and it would set up all of those different areas, and the Romans would take from there. So the historical purpose of Malachi is to record the manner in which God used the prophet's message to rebuke the Jewish remnant for their hypocritical worship. So let's go to Malachi chapter 1. We're going to get verses 6 through 8. Malachi chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. So we'll start with Tammy, go to Calla and Gord, one verse each.
The son honors his father, and his servant his master. If then I am a father, where is my honor? And if I am a master, where is my reverence? Says the Lord of hosts to you priests who despise my name. Yet you say, in what way have we despised your name?
You will present and defile food upon my altar, and you say, how have we defiled you? In that you say, the table of the Lord is to be despised.
And when you offer the blind as a sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you offer the lame and the sick, is it not evil? Offer it then to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you favorably, says the Lord of hosts.
All right, so we have here the hypocritical worship. Was Israel worshiping God here? I'm not talking about real worship. Were they worshiping God here? Yes, they were. They were worshiping God. They were offering sacrifices. They claimed they were honoring God. Yet what were they actually doing? Getting rid of their sick animals, sure.
Not we see.
Yeah, and they were offering defiled food. The law of Moses required the best, and it required certain foods to be offered. And they were offering food that was inedible to eat. So why would I give my best of my wheat when I have this stunted crop here that I can't sell and I can't eat? I'll offer that to God. I have this animal here. It's a very good animal, but I don't want to offer that to God. I'll offer this sickly animal over here that has some disease. Yeah, well, we don't know what was wrong with Cain's sacrifice, whether it wasn't pleasing, yes. It wasn't following God's directions. And the prophet Malachi here says, this is what God's telling you. Take what you're offering to God and offer it to your governor. See what he says about it. If the governor won't accept it because it is sickly and not fitting, what makes you think God will? The governor is a prestigious person, but he's not God. God is higher than the governor. And so if you won't offer it to your governor, for fear that the governor is going to get angry with you, don't offer it to me. Don't offer hypocritical worship. They claimed to be following God, but they weren't. There also was a moral decline that was occurring in Judah as well. Let's go to chapter 2. Let's read verses 10 through 16. We'll start with Leister. We'll go back to Jonathan. We'll do one verse each. Leister, Jonathan, then Dion, and then up to Henry. So 10 through 16 of chapter 2, one verse each.
And we not all Father, is not one of one God created us. Why do we deal treacherously with one another by profaning the covenants of the fathers?
Judah has forsaken and abomination has been committed in Israel and in Jerusalem. For Judah has profaned the sanctuary of the Lord, which he loves, and has buried the daughter of the foreign God.
Verse 12, Malachi.
May the Lord cut off from the tent of Jacob any descendant of the man who does this, who brings an offering to the Lord.
And this is second things to do. Cover the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping, crying, so he does not pick up the offering and nor receive with mistake good will from your hand.
You must be one who is because the Lord is holy. Acting as the Lord meekness, autonomy, and the right heart of your fears, because I have awakened in this ways. So she is before the wife of your marriage.
I hate divorce, says the Lord God of Israel, and I hate a man covering himself with violence as well as with his garment, says the Lord Almighty. So guard yourself in your spirit, and do not break faith.
Okay. When there's always seemingly a pattern when it comes to society. When society leaves God, morality soon follows. We see this happening in our world today. It happens in every generation, and every generation says that the generation before it, or the generation that comes after it, is not doing right. But I was reading polls yesterday as to how many people claim to be unaffiliated and non-religious, and we're now up to 25% of the population that claims to be unaffiliated, meaning they're not belonging to a denomination, and or non-religious at all. And so when we have 25% of the population claiming that, then we go on to what we know is people who claim to be religious but are not. They're not really involved in any church. They're, of course, we would believe they're involved in wrong churches, but leaving that aside, they don't act religious at all. And it's no wonder that our society has had such a moral decline. Why is it that it is hard to talk to people about fornication. Because society doesn't believe in the Bible. They say, well, it's an old book. It's 2,000 years old. What can these people teach me? Why do we have trouble talking about homosexuality? Same reason. About why do we see thieves just come in and prey upon the weak? You get calls all the time saying that you've won this. Now just send me $1,000 and you'll receive this money. People get fooled. Young people get fooled. Old people get fooled. And there are people out there who are just preying on the people who are a little bit more gullible or naive or greedy in certain cases. Why do we have this type of society? We've left God. Well, it was true in Malachi's time. We had this hypocritical worship. We had this worship that had left God, and so it is no wonder that morality came behind it. I note here in verse 16, it's a verse that's often used when we talk about divorce and remarriage. What does it say about divorce and God? He hates divorce. If you have the wrong version, there's the ESV, I think, is the one that I believe mistranslates this verse. God hates violence and putting away or something like that. They changed the wording so it doesn't say that God hates divorce. It says that God hates violence. No, God hates divorce, for it covers one's garment with violence. How does divorce cover one's garments with violence? What have we done to the marriage covenant? We've torn it apart. Yes, physically, divorce doesn't cause violence, physical violence, but it does cause spiritual violence. It rends a marriage covenant apart. It destroys fellowship that we have. It hurts both the husband and the wife and children, if there are any. God hates it. And so we should beware when it comes to divorce to recognize that God does not desire it. He permits it in one situation. But that doesn't mean he likes it. Sometimes we go along with things that are not sinful that we do not like. We don't have to like everything, even if it is something that is permitted, because of the consequences that can follow. And so when it comes to divorce, let's remember, God hates it. But the children of Israel, they were divorcing their spouses, left, right, and center. We know when it comes to Jesus' time, 400 years later, they're going to ask the question, is it lawful to divorce your spouse for any cause? That should tell you how far it went, where the Jews of that time believed it was proper and lawful to divorce your spouse for any cause. And of course, the law of Moses didn't allow that. Deuteronomy 24 does not say you just can divorce your spouse for any cause. There had to be reason for it. And Jesus tightened that when it came to New Testament teaching. So we have hypocritical worship. We have moral decline. While describing the widespread corruption of the priesthood and the corrupt and disloyal attitudes that God's people harbored against him, even though he had demonstrated his love to them and had provided for them. That was another purpose of the book of Malachi. So there was, if we read, we're not going to, but the first 9 verses of chapter 2 talked about corruption in the priesthood. Well, that should be of no surprise if there was corrupt worship. The priests were the ones offering the sacrifices. The people were bringing them the blemished sacrifices, but the priests were the ones offering it. And so if the people were worshiping hypocritically, so were the priests. And so we have this widespread corruption and disloyal attitude God's people harbored against him. They said, well, what way have we done these things? That was their questions. They ask, well, you say you love us, but what way have you loved us? It was all of these questions towards God, but he had demonstrated his love for them in that he had provided for them. Let's go to chapter 3. Now let's get verses 13 to 15. We'll do Sandy for verse 13, come across to Tammy and Kala for verse 14 and 15 of Malachi chapter 3.
Your words has been against me, say the Lord. Yet you say, what have we spoken against you?
You have said it's useless to serve God. What profit is it that we have kept his ordinance, and that we have walked as mourners before the Lord of hosts?
So now we call the arrogant blessed. Not only are they the doers of wickedness, well done, but they also test God and escape.
This is the attitude we have of the people in Malachi's day. Your words have been harsh against me, yet you say, in what way have we spoken against you? They were denying the very fact that God was displeased with them. They say, well, God says our words are harsh. How so? They were in complete denial. You said, if it is useless to serve God, what profit is it that we have kept his ordinance, and that we have walked as mourners before the Lord of hosts? They were complaining about that. Gordon.
What is striking about their attitude is they're questioning God, who is righteous in itself.
Yeah.
If God says so, then it is so.
Mm-hmm.
Who are they to question God? It's very arrogant
Yeah.
for them to question God.
Yeah. And that's what verse 15 says.
If he says you're a liar, or you're a fornicator, or you're this, or you're that, it is so.
Yes. Because he's all-knowing and sees all, and he's perfectly righteous.
So we should not question God.
No. Verse 15 of Malachi 3 says, no. So now we call the proud blessed. That's the attitude that Israel had. They were proud. For those who do wickedness are raised up, they even tempt God and go free. And come along and say, well, God hasn't punished us, so we must be right. That's not true either. But God had blessed them all the way through. Malachi's message, though, would direct the Jewish remnant towards repentance. Let's back up in Malachi chapter 3 to verses 6 and 7. We'll get Gord to get verse 6 and Leister to get verse 7. Malachi 3.
6 and 7?
Just verse 6 for you, but 7 for Leister.
For I am the Lord, I do not change, therefore you are not consumed, O sons of Jacob.
Yet from the days of your fathers we have gone away from my ordinances, yet you have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, says the Lord of hosts. But you say, in what way shall we?
All right, if you read today's bulletin, you'll find Malachi chapter 3, verse 6. The bulletin is titled, Can We Rely on God? And the question that people ask is, does the Lord change? And because the Lord does not change, he is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. His character does not change. We can rely on his promises because he does not change. For I am the Lord, I do not change, therefore you are not consumed, O sons of Jacob. Why hadn't God destroyed Judah? There's love and patience, but there was a specific reason he had love and patience.
As his son had to come through Judah.
His son had to come through Judah. He didn't destroy Israel when Babylon took them off into captivity. He still protected them. He has protected them all the way through here despite their rebellion and their proud and arrogant attitude. It doesn't mean God was overlooking those things. But God hasn't consumed them because of the promise to Abraham, the promise to Isaac, and the promise to Jacob. And so the Lord doesn't change. Yet the days of your father you have gone away from my ordinances and have not kept them. Israel, how many times in the desert when they were wandering from Egypt did they complain against God? We have no water. We have no food. They did that all of the time. And then they refused to take the promised land. And then they get in there. In the time of the judges, it was up and down and up and down and up and down. In the times of the kings, it was the same. And now we come to Malachi, and it's the same. For 1,000 years, Israel has been repeating the same pattern. Where God would call them to repent, they would repent, and then time would come, and they'd all fall off into sin, and over it would go again and again. And so this is Malachi's job. So how would the message of Malachi help motivate the Jewish remnant to repent and to return back to God in faithfulness? So let's get again Malachi chapter 3, verses 10 to 12. We're going to give that to Jonathan. And Dion, if you... Oh, no, you have Benjamin in your hands. Henry, can you get Malachi chapter 4, verses 1 through 3? So, Malachi chapter 3, verses 10 through 12.
Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to test, says the Lord of hosts. If I will not open the windows of heaven for you, and pour down for you blessing until there is no more need, I will rebuke the devourer for you, so that it will not destroy the fruits of your soul. And your wine in the field shall not fail to bear, says the Lord of hosts. Then all nations will call you blessing, for you will be a land of delight, says the Lord of hosts.
Okay, so what was Malachi calling upon Israel to do here?
To test God in a way. But if you do these things, God is going to give you.
What were they going to do to test God? You're right.
Bring your tithes and offerings in the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, and test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts.
Okay, so Malachi came along and said, you're supposed to be tithing. That was not just 10% of their money, it was 10% of their goods. Now, the tithes had a purpose. It was not a tax. Remember, the priests owned no land. The priests were in full service to God, so the priests needed to eat. The priests needed to be taken care of. Part of the tithe would go to the priest. Part of it would go to running the temple. There would need stuff done for that as well. And so, besides the commands, and there were other things that the tithes were useful for as well, but he said, obey me. I told you you are to bring your tithes. What will happen if you do? They would be blessed. They would be blessed. This is where maybe some people come along and say, well, the more you give, the more you will be blessed. That's not what this passage is saying. But I often find it interesting how people who give to the church don't a lot of the times don't seem to be lacking the needs that they need. That God does bless us. Let's not take this passage to say, well, the more we give, the more we receive. That's wrong. Therefore, if I give, that God won't bless me. I believe God blesses everyone as he sees fit. And if we are doing the will of God, perhaps he will bless us. It's not a guarantee, but perhaps he will. When we do good, we know he blesses us spiritually, and he can bless us physically as well. Let's not use that as, if I give this, God will give me this. That comes from a bad attitude, but and sort of a greedy attitude, where I want more things, therefore I will give. No, we give out of love to God, and God may bless us. God told the people here, you obey me, and you will be blessed. So let's go to Malachi chapter 4, verses 1 through 3.
So behold, the day is coming, morning making hour, and the hour that proud is out to quickly will be stopped. And the day which is coming shall be thorns in time, says the Lord of hosts. That will live in neither fruit nor branch. But to you who fear my name, the sound of righteousness shall rise, hesitating in his wings. You shall go out, and the crowd fat like starved fat cows. You shall trample the wicked, for they shall be ashes and the sole of your feet. On the day that I do it, says the Lord of hosts.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? It's more verses 2 and 3. What happens to those who fear God's name? They will grow, and trample the wicked. There will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day that I do this, says the Lord of hosts. They will overcome. They will overcome the wicked. And so this is how the message of Malachi would help motivate the Jewish remnant to repent. Obey God, and this is what God has said he will do. It's not that God was promising them something new. God promised them all the way back in Deuteronomy, if you follow my statutes, if you obey my laws, I will bless you. And the same is true today. God blesses us spiritually in Christ Jesus if we obey him. He does not bless us at all if we don't. We want to grow spiritually, obey God. Follow what the scriptures say. God will provide us wisdom. God will provide us forgiveness. And God will provide us salvation. God's blessings are great. Every perfect gift comes from God. James chapter 1 verse says. And so, obey God. That's what Malachi is teaching here. I do like, because we're not going to have time to go into the next section, I would like to take a look at one thing in verse 1. And it says, all the proud, yes, all who do wickedly will be to stubble. The word pride and the word arrogance never is used in Scripture as a positive thing. There is in the English Standard Version where Paul uses the word boast in most versions. The English Standard has translated that as pride. The Greek has nowhere in that word the word pride. And so if you have that version, you might come along and say, well, hold on a second. Paul does say, I am proud of you. No, he doesn't. That's not the use of the word proud. The first dictionary definition of the word proud in our dictionaries is arrogance. Malachi here talks about proud and pride as wickedness. And so that's something we need to be careful about. We can be proud in many different ways. We can say that we're proud in many different ways. I don't believe that's what we mean. Let's say what we mean. Let's watch out for pride, because pride does creep up on us. We can have an air of superiority. We need to get rid of that. We are saved the same way everyone else will be saved, and we should want to go out and teach the gospel to everyone that we can get in contact with. Not because we're better than them, but because we want them to be blessed like we're blessed.
I'm not ashamed to own my